Even before the polls opened on the final Super Tuesday came the news that on paper, Hillary Clinton had already clinched the Democratic nomination. So why aren't we hearing the sound of champagne corks popping? After all, the first female nominee from a major party in a U.S. presidential election is no small feat. But campaigning in California, the 68-year-old former First Lady and Secretary of State gave an understated reaction to the Associated Press's tally of superdelegates. Yes, the rules for picking a U.S. president can seem confusing, even to Americans. Also, her rival for the nomination, not ready to call it quits. Bernie Sanders hopes to convince those superdelegates to change their mind. The Vermont senator plans to take his fight to the convention in July. It's more than a fight for delegates. Some call it a fight for the soul of the Democratic Party, a party that's changing and not enough in tune with the young, with the working classes. We'll see how and whether Clinton is the one to corral all those fired-up Sanders supporters or those tempted by Trump. Today in the France 24 debate, is it really Clinton's moment this time? And with us, Amy Green, lecturer in U.S. politics and international relations at Sciences Po and the author of America After Obama. Thank you for being with us again. Thanks as well to Jean-Yves Pranat, author of Hillary, a President of the United States, and teaches at Paris 2 University at Assas. Joining us from Austin, Texas, political strategist Chasen Campbell of Harris Media. Jason, you're not supporting Hillary or Bernie?
I'm not. I'm supporting Donald Trump.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And thanks as well to France 24's very own Douglas Herbert. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. That magic number, 2,383 delegates late Monday securing Clinton's nomination. Again, this is on paper. This isn't chiseled in stone, but she mentioned it almost in a matter-of-fact way while campaigning in California on the eve of the vote.
According to the news, we are on the brink of a historic, unprecedented moment. But we still have work to do, don't we? We have 6 elections tomorrow. And we're going to fight hard for every single vote, especially right here in California.
So, Amy Green, no premature celebrations. What happens if Bernie Sanders wins big in California?
At this point, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the math is the reality behind the situation. So if Bernie Sanders were to win California, it's most likely to be by a very small spread of points. Essentially, for Bernie Sanders to catch up with Hillary Clinton's lead in pledged delegates, so not the superdelegates, he'd have to win 70% or more of the vote in all of the remaining states. So Bernie Sanders could win California. It could certainly raise questions for the Clinton campaign, but it couldn't be enough to fundamentally alter the dynamics of the race in any important way.
Would it stir unease going into that convention, or is this just speculation from hacks who like to keep the suspense going?
The only way Bernie Sanders could win the nomination today would be to dramatically reverse the tide in the pledged superdelegates, as well as winning essentially all of the remaining primaries to an extraordinary amount. He hasn't won over 70% of the vote in any state but his home state of Vermont. So essentially, I think it would just fuel the fire. It would prolong the debate, but it wouldn't essentially change the fact that Hillary Clinton looks today to be the confirmed, or soon to be the confirmed, Democratic presidential nominee.
Superdelegates or not, Sanders insisting on the eve of the last primaries that he's still in it to win it.
Well, it's going to be very difficult. I'm not here to deny that for a second. But the case we're going to make to the superdelegates is everybody at the Democratic National Convention is going to want to defeat Donald Trump for good reasons. He is a disaster and must not become president of the United States. Well, you know what? According to every national poll that I have seen, and according to virtually every state poll that I have seen, Bernie Sanders is a much stronger candidate against Donald Trump than is Hillary Clinton.
All right, Bernie Sanders, talking about Bernie Sanders there. Jean-Yves Pranat, is it over, and does he have a point?
I don't know what he said because I couldn't hear.
You couldn't hear properly.
Sorry about that.
Oh dear, I turned to the wrong person.
But I can,
technical issues here.
Yeah,
we can hear you. No, Bernie Sanders saying effectively that he is he's the strongest candidate to defeat Donald Trump, and that it's not over. Is he the strongest man to defeat Donald Trump?
that's his opinion. I don't understand why he's still in the race. Is hitting Hillary Clinton campaign so hard now? I think the damages that is causing to her campaign can be everlasting. So there is a real problem now facing the campaign. When I heard that maybe he's clinching to the campaign up to the end, this is something that is not understandable for. Yeah.
Yeah, we just add the fact, I mean, he's still in the campaign, I mean, simply because he's waged one of the most successful insurgent campaigns in modern political American history, political history. And he genuinely believes that he deserves to be in it to the end.
I don't think so.
And even Hillary Clinton has been very wary, her entire campaign team, of asking Bernie Sanders to get out of the race. She's very cognizant of the fact that she herself will remember the 2008 primary season, the battle over superdelegates with Barack Obama. And you'll remember that it was only after Barack Obama clinched on June 3rd, 2008, that Hillary Clinton finally, and he had a whole bunch, I think it was up to 50 superdelegates, suddenly flocked to Obama's camp. That was the turning point. And it was only then, we're talking around the same time, that Hillary Clinton finally conceded.
No.
4 days later, she conceded, and that's when we got the nomination.
If I could just say a word, the thing is that Hillary Clinton is going through a fantastic campaign. The thing is that it doesn't go through the media because it's a small campaign, close to the people, you know.
Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton.
Not Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Most of her rallies are small ones. It's not having 30,000 people in front of you. People like to be in a very big rally like Bernie Sanders. But if you've been there, you know that those people can't talk. They just cannot talk to Bernie Sanders. He's talking to them, but it is not
But those are grassroots rallies. I'm sorry to interrupt. They're grassroots rallies
when you
that Bernie
say
Sanders
it's really a fantastic campaign, it is not. It's second. The fact is that he's not the winner. His campaign is fantastic if you consider only the youth. Yes, for sure, there is here a big problem for Hillary Clinton. But for the rest of the country, she's the winner. Whatever you decide to say, she's the winner. And that's the only thing that counts at the end. And there is history now that is made in front of us, because for the first time there is a woman who is candidate. This is a historical point that we have to take into account.
I think history is important. I think that most Americans would say they want the right candidate. They don't want just the woman candidate. They want the right woman candidate. But what's interesting in this case is to harken back to the 8 years ago, almost to the day, effectively, when Hillary Clinton gave her 18 million cracks in the glass ceiling speech to concede defeat to Barack Obama. Essentially, the criteria for Obama's clenching of the nomination and what prompted Hillary to withdraw was the exact same criteria that the Associated Press used just yesterday. So it's the pledged delegates plus the superdelegates. And at that point, Hillary Clinton decided party unity was more important than her campaign, than continuing her campaign to a bloody convention. And I think the pressure, we saw a New York Times article leaked in which Obama said he's chomping at the bits to start campaigning for Clinton, followed by this AP declaration of Hillary as the candidate, essentially shows that there's a moving pressure as well as within the Democratic establishment.
Let me bring in Jason Campbell on this because the day began with, in California, the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who hails from there, announcing that she was endorsing Hillary Clinton. Do you feel as though, it's all over, in point of fact, for the Democratic nomination, and that this is all part of a concerted effort to build up momentum for the Democrats?
Well, I think the continued establishment support that comes behind Hillary Clinton is exactly why Bernie Sanders is continuing his campaign in California, and why I do believe that he has a very strong argument for why that he should carry this on to the convention. He's exposing a very, important ideological divide right now within the Democratic Party that is a huge split between the establishment that is supporting Hillary Clinton, but versus the youth vote and working class vote that is supporting Bernie Sanders. And I wouldn't agree with something that was said earlier that Hillary Clinton's campaign is, closer with the people. I think if you look at all the statistics and the fundraising numbers that are out, it's very clear that the people, if we're talking about the average Americans who only have, $30, $40, $50 to give to a political campaign, those people are very clearly on the side of Bernie Sanders. And, as speaking as someone that's watching this on the outside, not being a Democratic operative myself, it's very interesting seeing this happen right now, because 2-3 months ago, everyone thought that the Republican Party would be in this situation heading into Cleveland, when now Donald Trump is doing a good job rallying support, and Bernie and Hillary are continuing to hash this out and expose those divides that are very real right now.
We saw those divides again, as the panel was saying, 8 years ago, and yet Barack Obama was the winner.
Yes, well, I think that, that's a fair point. And I think that, it's very likely that after California and the other states vote today, that Hillary will, extend some communication to Bernie and talk with him. But if he continues down the road that he's been saying for weeks, that he's going to continue this to the convention and try to peel off some superdelegate support before Philadelphia, then I don't think that he will be getting out anytime soon.
All right, lots of reactions on the hashtag F24 debate. This one from Derek. This time around, it is positive that Hillary Clinton is to be the nominee. However, she has a negative history that plagues her. Amy Green, familiarity breeds contempt in this case?
Hillary Clinton's a particular example for any of us who are able to remember when she came onto the national spotlight in the early 90s. I mean, she's been not only the most admired woman in America for the last, 15, 20 years, she's also been one of the sort of most the American that many people would be skeptical of. She's been a lightning rod. She's been an example, the first lady, for example, who was not apologetic about having a career. She's been a lightning rod. She had the healthcare reform under her husband's administration. She went to Beijing talking about women's rights or human rights once and for all. So she's been a singular figure in American politics and American public life. So, I mean, of course, familiarity can breed contempt, but I think when you look at the victories she's won, sure, she has a problem with many young people. I think party unity going forward is the most important thing for the Democrats, but she's won working class voters, minority voters of different minority groups. So I don't think you can really challenge her appeal to Democratic voters.
I can assume that part of the negativity that viewer talks about has to do with the Monica Lewinsky affair and with the fact that there was scandal under Bill Clinton's administration. Absolutely.
I mean, there's been a lot of scandal. What's interesting is that Hillary Clinton, if you objectively sort of look at her background from being a sort of a progressive activist and through becoming the mainstream, I mean, that's exactly right. The Clintons have gone from political insurgents to the mainstream. And of course, when you have that history, you have familiarity, you have scandal. And of course, it's undeniable. And the trust issues are there, and they perhaps will always be there.
Another reaction on the hashtag F24 debate. Come on, Bernie Sanders. Honorably concede defeat now before you are forced out. Jean-Éric Brana nodding vigorously, Douglas Herbert.
Well, no, I mean, this is the whole thing now. The pressure is already mounting on Bernie Sanders, even before we have the results in from this last batch of major state primaries, to drop out and resign. And it is, there's this circling of the wagons, and you see it in the American political process. There's a point at which you're supposed to have the presumptive nominee. How many times have we used the word presumptive on this set? And usually long before June. We were saying about Trump 2 months ago. Once you start using that word presumptive with a nominee, there's almost like this tripwire which is set off, and this momentum builds, and the narrative is that you start to have to get around that nominee, whether you love that nominee or not, that is going to be your party's nominee, and the other person, whether he likes it or not or she likes it or not, has to bow out. And this is really the narrative right now, and it is that. It's a narrative that Bernie Sanders is trying to fight against, this sense of absolute inevitability. We started out by saying, I think Amy said, that the math is, squarely on Hillary's side, and it's hard to argue with that. It would take a near mathematical miracle for Bernie Sanders to mathematically pull it off.
Okay, but here's the problem.
But the problem is the narrative is telling him he has to back out now, whereas he's saying he believes he has a right because of his campaign to stay in the race, and he shouldn't feel guilty about doing so, and shouldn't be made to feel as if by staying in the race he's going to be the cause of Donald Trump potentially being elected president.
But again, we look to what the argument that we heard Sanders make in those remarks late on Monday, and if we look at the polls and we see the head-to-head matchup between Sanders and Trump and Clinton and Trump, it seems as though Sanders has a better lock
That's his whole argument.
White
That's one of
House.
his main arguments. Forget the math aside. He is actually looking at, and look, Sanders is saying it publicly. A lot of Democrats right now who are, on paper at least, saying that they endorse Hillary Clinton, that they're rallying behind her, they have, I'm sure, a lot of night sweats when they go to bed over just how she is going to fare against Trump. And there are a lot of, they'll be lying if they tell you otherwise, but Democratic strategists and Democratic leaders right now are thinking of every other possible scenario, up to and including drafting in other people at the convention. I'm not saying that doesn't mean Hillary Clinton isn't the presumptive nominee and won't lock it in and won't get it. I'm just saying they'd be lying to tell you they're not seriously thinking of those other scenarios, however far-fetched they may seem, from Biden's to John Kerry's to whatnot, because they don't have that comfort zone factor entirely with Hillary just yet.
Let me bring in Jason Campbell on this. Jason, we've heard Donald Trump, what he has to say, how he thinks Clinton's a terrible candidate and that Bernie would be a much tougher candidate against him. But campaign rhetoric aside, let's get off message here. Does she still have something in the tank, do you think, during the general election campaign? Will she be a better campaigner than Trump says?
I don't think that campaigning is necessarily Hillary Clinton's strength, and she does have an inherent problem with the party right now in that there is no excitement for her campaign. The excitement, albeit why he may be losing, is it's with Bernie Sanders. And if you go into a general between Hillary and Trump, there's still a lot of unanswered questions in Hillary. We were talking about scandals earlier. There's still a lot of unanswered questions about the ongoing investigation into how she handled her private email server as Secretary of State. That seems to become more and more serious with every passing day and more information coming out. And I think, it's a fair thing to say that a lot of Democrats are very worried about that because they might possibly have a candidate going into a general election that is currently under, maybe perhaps FBI indictment for how she handled her previous appointment. So that is something that, I think Trump is doing a very good job of pointing out. And I think there's a good argument to say that Bernie might be more difficult for Trump because Bernie's voters want to vote for Bernie. They want him to win. Whereas I don't necessarily think that excitement is there with Hillary for her voters. They're just voting for her because they don't want Bernie or, they believe that she's going to be the presumptive nominee anyway.
Jean-Yves Brana, you agree?
I couldn't hear again. I'm sorry.
Still trouble hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it to Amy Green. Do you agree with that there just isn't the enthusiasm for Clinton that there is for Trump or Sanders?
Well, to say that Hillary Clinton voters are only voting for Hillary Clinton based on resignation, I think, is a gross overstatement and a completely inaccurate thing to say for any candidate, for that matter, no matter who they are. But essentially, what's important is the narrative. That is an important point. But if you look at many of the polls, they will say as well that Hillary Clinton simply needs to maintain the same path that Obama took to victory. Essentially, keep the same states, maybe flip another state. But there's very little she has to win in addition or to change fundamentally on the electoral.
And this email scandal?
The email scandal, we're not at indictment. I think it harms her in the sense that it plays into the trust issues. If you want to talk about trust issues, you can talk about the 3,500 lawsuits that have been filed against Donald Trump. You can talk about trust in any number of directions. But just to finish my point, what's important to know is that today, going forward, the most important thing for the Democratic Party is party unity behind a candidate. Right. Going until September, August, and leaving the candidate 2 months to rally the party and to win undecided voters is just unrealistic and damaging.
We're going to pick up on those points when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.